races in the history of the championship. Mitch Evans wins in Mexico City.
Yes! This is how it's done, mate. Superb drive.
So hello at Jaguar Racing on International Women's Day. We choose to challenge the idea of gender because we think it's all about the skills and the dedication of the team and the motorsport network around us that actually helps the Formula E world go round. So on this bespoke International Women's Day recharge at home, we're going to hear in a little more detail about the roles taken on by women in motorsport, both in the Jaguar Racing team and also wider afield. Now, in today's episode, we're going to have a revolving door of guests, including journalists, sustainability directors, partnership managers, commercial team members, and press officers. And to kick us off, I'm delighted to say that I am first of all joined by Philippa J. Faulkner, who is a business programs executive at Jaguar, Sarah Morrow, who is the commercial manager of the team, and Chrissy Simmons, who is Jaguar Racing's team coordinator. Welcome to all of you, ladies.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I know that all of you are used to being behind the scenes a little bit, so thank you, first of all, for joining me on here. I want you just to tell me a little bit about your roles, your career, how you ended up where you are today, and what it is that your role actually entails.
So I've kind of been in the automotive industry for about 10 years now and work in the Jaguar race team as the business program executive, which is kind of a bit of a planner role, I think is the best way to call it. I basically look after our work streams pre-season. So that's getting our team livery for the car, it's the team kit, our apparel choices, as well as then kind of our brand look and feel.
So a lot of organisation then goes into what you do.
Yeah, a lot of planning, a lot of kind of project meetings and keeping everyone to task. This job came up with Formula E and Jaguar Racing. And if I'm honest, I just thought I'd have a go. Didn't really expect to get very far with it. And lo and behold, had a phone call and went and met Sarah, who's now my manager. And thankfully, she gave me a shot and I got to come into the world of motorsport and Formula E. Now,
I've just got to ask, why did you not think you would have a shot?
So my background's after sales. It's very much, typical traditional car manufacturer kind of work that I'd kind of been in. And obviously, motorsport is incredibly competitive. There's so many people are so passionate about it and want to get into it, and it's a very crowded market and you've got to have the right skills and attribute. And my knowledge probably wasn't there at the time with Formula E. I think if you'd asked me anything to do with the Formula E setup, I probably wouldn't have been able to answer it very well. So it was kind of a great opportunity for me to kind of come on board and learn from the bottom.
You do know you're walking into this next question. Do you think it's the fact that you were a woman not knowing about Formula E? Do you think it was that was making you nervous, or just the fact that you felt just purely on paper you just didn't have the experience?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a bit of both. I mean, when you look at Formula E and Formula One and other motorsport, I mean, my exposure was BTCC, and the only kind of major, there weren't really women drivers on the grid. There is now, but at the time there wasn't. And I think you sort of looked around you and there wasn't a lot of women doing that. But I don't think that really influenced me on the Formula E front. I think I was more worried that I was too traditional motor industry rather than actually having, being a woman or a man or anything like that. That didn't really come into it.
Thanks very much. Sarah, on to you. Your role and how you ended up here, your career path.
We've not got enough time to go through my whole career path, I have to be honest. So I've been in the motor industry all my working life, which is quite a long time. I started my career within the leasing industry, actually, but then moved to Jaguar 20 years ago, which is quite scary. And then I've ended up in the motorsport side, really, because I came in from the sponsorship side of Jaguar. And actually, I love setting businesses up. So it was kind of an area that I felt that I would actually be really good at.
Your job title now is commercial manager. So what does that mean you do?
My role is twofold, really. I think part is operational. So we do all the project management, we do all the planning for the racing, and all my team support that side of it. So getting ready for each race, getting ready for the season ahead. And then the other side is much more the business side of the team, making sure that we are exploring every commercial opportunity that we can, and just making sure that we've got the governance processes in place to make everything work.
Thank you. And Chrissy, what about you?
So, as the team coordinator, I assist in travel, accommodation, getting the team to the races, things like that. And I also help our director, James Barkley, organise his very busy diary.
Now, okay, I'm going to ask all of you this question. Do you think being a female changes anything to do with your day job, or any of the outcomes in your day job? So do you think being a female has worked for you or worked against you in any way?
Do you know what? I don't actually give it that much thought, if I'm totally honest. I think I've kind of got confidence in my abilities and in who I am and my skill set rather than my gender. So, you know, the automotive industry is still very much male dominated. You know, it's still really heavy in that respect. But that doesn't deter me. You know, I've been in the industry, you know, for a number of years since I left university, and, you know, it's probably made me stronger. It's given me better resilience, I guess, to deal with any sexism that probably came around in the start of my career. But beyond that, I think, you know, I'm here to get the job done and make sure the team go out every season now and look, you know, as premium as Jaguar Racing stands for. I don't see that being gender related for me.
And have any of you ever experienced any sort of obvious discrimination due to your gender? Or has there been a moment maybe that sticks out where something or somebody has said something that is so ridiculous that you actually just, you know, had to process it for a moment? I mean, I can tell you one of mine, just to give you some ideas. I was racing many years ago. This was back pre-internet when news was gained through magazines that generally came out once a month. And I was racing in Germany. And I was having a brilliant battle with this other German driver. And he came up to me in Parc Ferme at the end of the race to shake my hand and say, that was brilliant. You know, you let me through and I let you through. And we were just, we were dicing and there was always space. And as I took my helmet off, he actually visibly stood back and just said, oh my God, you're a girl. And it was just like, well, and yeah. So has anyone ever experienced anything sort of similar to that, or anything that makes you laugh now you look back at it?
I think I probably did it at the beginning of my career, but I started working in the 90s, which was, again, quite scary. But I think there definitely was back then, and there was the need to prove yourself constantly, to prove that you were good, that you knew your subject, that you could talk about things like cars to men, and actually be knowledgeable and competent in that area. So yes, I think I did initially experience, I guess, a lot of people checking me. What did I know? Did I know it? And I was probably challenged the most at the beginning, because it was kind of, do you actually know what you're talking about? Mm-hmm. In a very male-dominated industry. But I think, like Philippa said before, it just actually made me a bit more resilient.
Yeah.
And a bit more, actually, I do know what I'm talking about, and I can talk about these things knowledgeably. And, you know, just because I'm a girl doesn't mean I can't talk about cars.
And listen to me.
Yes.
Well, we all listen to you, Sarah. And were any of your peers surprised that you chose to come into automotive or into Jaguar Racing, an area that they perceived to be particularly male-dominated?
Yes, I think when I told people that I was going into the Jaguar Racing team, they were like, oh, didn't know you were into racing. But I don't think you necessarily have to be, because it is one of those things that you get into as you go along, definitely.
Can you all just give me 3 words of advice or pieces of advice or something similar, attributes that you think you should have, just a few words that you think would be useful or general advice for people who are looking to get involved?
So I think the piece of advice I would just give anyone is just to be yourself and to grow your skills, and just take any opportunity you can get your hands on to learn. Any bit of experience is going to help you, and it really doesn't matter if you're male, female, or anything else at all. I think, just be yourself and learn and listen to what others are telling you.
I think actually putting people first and making sure that you communication is at the core of whatever you do. And like Philippa said, learning to listen, learning to communicate as clearly as possible. I think actually this business is all about the people, and it's the people that make this a great place to be. So I think put the people first, maybe before just being focused on your job.
And Chrissy?
I don't know how I can top either of those. Yeah, I think you're right. People are definitely, you need to be able to communicate. You need to listen, especially well. And yeah, just go in, enjoy yourself and make some nice friends on the exit.
Definitely. I third that. Brilliant. Ladies, you've been absolutely fabulous. I'm going to let you revolve out of my revolving doors. But I look forward to seeing you all really soon. Take care and stay smiling. So joining me now, I'm delighted to say I've got two of the wonderful women who work at Formula E. We've got Julia Palais, who is the Sustainability Director, and Jess Burrell. So welcome to both of you. It's great to have you joining us today. Can you just tell me a little bit about your role, what you do, and just your sort of career path, how you ended up working with Formula E?
Thank you so much for having us. I'm as I said, I'm Sustainability Director at Formula E. So my background is very much sustainability. I'm a sustainability expert, but I've always had this kind of like weird career mix in doing sustainability in motorsport. So I've been working for Michelin for a couple of years, implementing their sustainability strategy at the motorsport level. And then I had the chance to move on to do that at Formula E at the very beginning of the championship. So really starting with a blank page and crafting little by little the strategy as we were growing and developing.
And has that changed as the championship has developed?
Massively. There's been a very, natural and normal evolution for the championship and the strategy regarding sustainability. In the beginning, we were probably more focusing on the environmental side of the story to make sure that, I think the expectations really of the stakeholders and the media and so on was really to have kind of like the environmental excellence. And then we moved on, including more of the social aspects, and now we are kind of like really getting to the level where we are including more our ecosystem and trying to work more closely with them on our common sustainability goals.
You must be really pleased because Formula E really is the sort of benchmark now for other championships to try and emulate.
I think it was always the intention, absolutely. And in sustainability, it's not about the competition per se. Certainly, it's about the innovation, and then it's to try and make sure that we are going to trickle down. These best practices.
And Jess, what about you? How did you end up with us today?
I have always been a massive motorsport fan as a child, and I knew growing up through school that I'd always wanted to work in the fast-paced environment of a paddock. I studied journalism at university, and a month after graduating, I saw on social media that Formula E were looking for interns, and I thought this is a dream come true. And I started as a 3-month intern looking after media accreditation, and over 5 years later, I now oversee the day-to-day press office and the motorsport arm of the communications department.
Gosh, so what would you say the biggest thing you've learned is across your career?
I would definitely say for the 5 years I've worked at Formula E, going from a beginner role into something a bit more experienced, you cannot be afraid of hard work, and no is never an answer, especially when you're a part of creating something groundbreaking like Formula E. There are always solutions, and that approach has helped me so far.
So do you think being a female actually sort of affects what you do in your day job in any way, or does it affect the outcome of what you do?
I think it necessarily affects the outcome in the sense that I have my style as an individual and my femininity is part of who I am. Of course, it doesn't affect what I'm requested to do. The mission is exactly the same.
Have you ever experienced any sort of real blatant discrimination because of your gender? Or has there been a moment perhaps where something sticks out, where somebody has said something or done something that you just couldn't quite believe really happened?
I mean, I'm probably kind of like on my end, I've never really experienced anything like discrimination. I've had some, let's say, kind of like weird, comments, negative statements, but most often, and that's why it's really kind of like really surprising coming from women that were actually kind of like, not really positive, not really kind of like open of having another woman coming in the environment, which is really surprising and shows how ingrained this negative culture could be.
And Jess, what about you? I mean, I know in Formula One, there's been reported incidents of journalists being harassed by drivers and things. So have you ever come across anything, or maybe not necessarily to you, but that you've heard about?
Yeah, so being a female in my role doesn't make a difference to my day-to-day work. And I think in Formula E that you can see that attitude is felt by the entire team. The Formula E team is pretty much a 50-50 split, and 4 of the 9 executives that lead our departments are also female. So I'm sure being a 5'3" woman shouting at 24 drivers to get into position for a photo isn't easy for all. But I can honestly say Formula E has always been a very inclusive paddock, and we treat each other as family. However, that being said, I know at university when we were doing sport modules and everything like that, the old school teachers would go, you're interested in sport? Hey, we'll treat you as the token classmate. And when you get a first in your dissertation, you can prove those people wrong. So I think let your results speak for themselves rather than anything personal.
And did you find that sort of discrimination just amongst the sort of old school teachers and not amongst your peers? Or was there ever anything that you were getting from peers as well?
I definitely do. I think everyone these days are a lot more open to understanding that jobs are open for everyone, no matter your gender or any other kind of differentiate. But I definitely think that old school teachers don't maybe encourage you as much as you should. And I think I wrote my dissertation actually on female sporting reporters and how they're treated. And I was amazed to hear pretty much the same story across the board, that as soon as they made their venture into their first job, all of that kind of discrimination about being female has dropped, because you have to get into that job. And, Amanda, you all know that, motorsport is a fast-paced environment and it's not for everyone. So if you are here, you're definitely cut out for this role, no matter who you are.
I remember one of the first races I did when I was very young, 2 very old ex-touring car drivers deliberately intimidated me on the track. So they deliberately came either side and squeezed me to see what I would do, because they were actually testing me. And afterwards I said to them, what were you doing that for? And they said, we had to test you because we needed to know how you were going to react in a race. So this was in practice. But like you said, once I had proved myself, they actually respected me. But I felt that I had to jump through that extra hoop before they would respect me.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's as if you need to do an extra mile.
Yeah. Have you ever found that, Julia?
I must say no, but in my career, I've always come up as the expert in my topic, which is really specific. So I was coming as a brain and nothing else mattered. At least that's really kind of like the way I was positioning myself, which probably kind of like help, get out of any of these kind of situations, because I knew more than anyone else in the room about my topic.
If you could sum up or just give some advice to anybody who is looking at coming into a similar role to you or coming into motorsport, any particular attributes that people should have, what advice would you both give?
So I have 3 pieces of advice. I would say certainly be determined, sometimes maybe almost stubborn, because you need to really be very focused on what you want to achieve. Be sure that you speak their language, in the sense that put yourself in their shoes and make sure that, they will understand what you want to achieve, so that it's a team, it's a team effort. And then be always very solution driven. Don't come up with a problem, come with a proposed solution.
Great advice. Jess, what about you?
She's taken my advice.
Sorry.
No, I would definitely say build a strong network of people around you. They're going to be your support system whenever you're traveling across the world or you're working long hours. They're the people that you will fall back on. And I also think it's all about relationship building in no matter what job. I know it helps for us in communications, but I'm sure Julia can attest to speaking to different people from different environments and understanding how they work and wanting to work together. And the final thing is do what you love, and it won't be work.
Great advice from both of you guys. Thank you so much. Stay wonderful. Great to see you. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks,
Hopefully. I shall let you revolve out of the doors.
Thank you so much.
So now on my virtual revolving door sofa, I'm delighted to say I have got Janina Casals, Partnership Manager for Jaguar Racing, Jess Short, who is the Events Manager, and Claire Boakes, who is Comms Manager. Ladies, how wonderful to see you all. First of all, just tell me a little bit about your role that you do now, what it is you actually do, and your route to actually getting here. So Jess, let's start with you.
So my route to getting to being the event manager for Jaguar Racing began with my degree. Did my degree in events and then have been in the industry for 10 years, but in the automotive industry now for 6. And being in the wider Jaguar Land Rover business, I was able to support our Jaguar Racing team at events on site. And then last April took the role on full time. So that's brought me to motorsport.
Did you always have an interest in motorsport?
I didn't. It's definitely got me though. I have to say, once you're in it, it's very immersive. So I love it. I wouldn't change it. I'm really glad I landed here. But if someone had said 5 years ago, do you see yourself supporting a race team? I wouldn't have necessarily said yes, but I'm glad that's where I am now.
Fantastic. And Claire, what about you?
So I look after the storytelling of our race to road and road to race innovations within the Jaguar Racing team, specifically looking at technical advancements.
And how did you end up doing what you do? What was your route?
So showing my age now, I've worked in motorsport for about 20 years. Following my degree, I worked for a small PR agency that specialised in motorsport. So everything from Formula 4 with young Anthony Davidson right through to the likes of Speedway, and then further into Formula 1, World Rally, British Rally, and more recently with the Jaguar Racing team.
And Janina, congratulations, of course, on your wedding, which had to happen sort of rescheduled. But anyway, congratulations on that. How did you end up doing what you do?
Yeah, so I grew up in motorsport, born and bred, probably started going to the racetrack before I was actually even born. My father has been an engineer in motorsport all my life, as well as managing teams and drivers. But I took an interest in what he did. And from about 16, I started going to the racetrack, just learning where I could, supporting the team, mostly making teas and coffees, but doing pit boards, timing laps. I mean, that shows my age. We didn't have timed tests on screens. So we had to stopwatch everything. And yeah, I built my sort of A-levels and university degree around being able to work in motorsports. I'm not technically minded, so I knew that I couldn't do the technical stuff. And after graduating, although I didn't work in motorsport, I soon managed to get a role where I started in reception at a race team, and then gradually moved into the travel office, which led me to working on events, and then into marketing.
Partnerships manager now for the team. What does that mean you actually do?
So I help support each of our partners in any of their activations that they want to do with the team, with the drivers, with if they want to come to races, we support their hospitality programs with guests, but mostly activations where they want to use any of our assets to tell their story, really, and the correlations between their brands and ours, predominantly in the Race to Innovate, Race to Inspire and sustainability areas.
Now, throughout all of your racing, your careers, because not all of them have always been in racing, what would you say the biggest thing that you've learned is?
I think for me, it's definitely keeping an open mind, because things don't always go to plan, and that there is always a solution. So when things look like they're not going to plan, not to worry, there's always a solution in the end.
Janina?
I think for me, not ruling anything out, sort of knowledge is key. And I think, like I said, I'm not technically minded, but I always took an interest in it. I always thought it was really important to actually understand every area of the business, not just the area that you are strong in, because I think it actually enhances your work in the end.
Absolutely right. So obviously this is International Women's Day, and so we are celebrating all of you and your fabulous achievements. Do you think that being a woman in your job has affected any of your outcomes? So do you think it plays for you or against you, or do you think it doesn't make any difference at all?
I don't know is the honest answer. I don't believe it's impacted me negatively. I think in my industry, being events, it is female dominated. In fact, to date, all my management have been females. So it's impacted me maybe in that way, but I don't think it's hindered me to my knowledge.
Why do you think it is such a female dominated part of the industry?
It's a good question. And I mean, I have had some forms of discrimination against it, the flower arrangers or the coffee makers. You do get that, and it comes and you let it go. But overall, just the women and the people I've worked with have been very good at their jobs, building relationships and organised, and that's more the attributes I look at.
I think more recently I've seen more women in the comms capacity, certainly in racing teams, and brilliantly in more senior roles as well. So no, I don't think it's affected me personally.
No, I think I agree. I think, probably when I was younger and when I wanted to first start out, it was quite challenging. People just didn't understand why a girl was interested in motorsport. And like I said, I never saw girls at the racetrack, to be honest. So when I was there learning, I was the only one who wasn't family. Well, I'm related to my dad, but who wasn't sort of associated to a driver, essentially. And I think it was weird. It was definitely weird for all of my friends. I went to an all-girls school. They were literally just like, why? But like I say, our roles are quite female dominated anyway. So I don't think it was definitely never negative. I certainly saw female discrimination when I was working. I've witnessed someone not be chosen as a mechanic on a race team because she couldn't share a room with any of the mechanics, and it wouldn't be fair on all the other boys if she had her own room at a race. And I thought that was outrageous, but she was literally the only female mechanic on the team. So yeah, she didn't get a race team role because of that. And I thought I was so gutted for her. And I hope that changes. I hope there are more women now traveling the circus.
Well, I think the great thing about Formula E is that sort of generally speaking, you see a lot of women. I know in the Formula E organisation, it's about 50-50. And certainly I think within Jaguar Racing, we do pretty well. I don't know what the exact stat is, but I'd say we do pretty well. But have any of you others sort of experienced any sort of outward discrimination or hostility or any moment that's just made you take a step back?
I mean, I can say of one. When I was, like I said before, I was trying to figure out my path and see what I could do in motorsports. And I remember asking championship organisers at the end of the season that I'd been part of, sort of what career paths there were for me in motorsport that weren't technical. And I got told to work in promotions. And at the time, I had no idea what it was. I went home and Googled it. And essentially, they told me to be an umbrella girl or a grid girl. And there's absolutely no harm if that is what you want to do. But I couldn't believe that it was the only thing they could suggest.
So is there any advice that you would all give to people who maybe want to follow a similar path to you? Is there any particular attributes or skills or things that you would say to people now at the start of their path, start of their journey? This is what you need to focus on. Jess, start with you.
I think it's the right attitude and relationships.
So I would advocate work experience. Much to my granny's disgust, I used to work for nothing on a Friday. And I have to say, I think that held me in pretty good stead because you just persevere, you're hearing, you're listening, you're watching, you're learning constantly, and it reinforces that this is what you actually want to do. So if you can, don't ever stop trying to get through to people for opportunities to seek work experience, paid or otherwise. Focus. If this is what you've decided good looks like, hang in there. You might feel an experience knocks, but try not to be perturbed. And I think, as I said earlier on, play fair, be kind. You just don't know who you're going to work with, how it's going to play out. And you don't know who you're going to surround yourself with going forward.
I would agree with Claire. I think learning as much as you can along the way, however you can, is really important. It's part of what had got me listened to when I said, no, this is something serious that I really want to do.
Great stuff. It is lovely as always to talk to all of you. Thank you very much, and happy International Women's Day. Right, I am now delighted to welcome my final batch of guests, starting off with Emily Hogg, who's a media officer at Jaguar Racing. We've got Hazel Southwell, who is one of our well-known and well-loved journalists. And finally, Imogen Shaw, who's a communications officer, also at Jaguar Racing. Welcome to all of you. Listen, it's so nice to be able to see some lovely, smiley, beautiful, friendly faces. It's been so long since, of course, we have seen one another. I want to start off with you all just telling me about how you ended up doing what you do now. So what was your route to, if you like, being on this podcast? Emily, we'll start with you.
Fabulous. So it's an interesting one. I did a business with law degree, and being completely transparent, I had no interest in the automotive industry. I had my heart set on being a lawyer. And when I had to apply for placement years, I decided that I was going to apply for HR roles. So I applied for an HR role with a manufacturer in the UK. And they came back and said to me, we'd love to have you in the team, but we think it would be best if you worked in PR. And I was thinking, well, hold on a second. I think I want to work down, a corporate legal HR route, not really sure how that relates to PR. But I looked at the job description and I thought, well, this sounds like an interesting job, very varied. Every day sounded different. So I took the job and I did my undergraduate placement year there. And I just absolutely fell in love with the automotive industry. I fell in love with PR. It was just incredible. And then finished university, went and worked for an automotive agency for a year. And then I came to Jaguar Land Rover. It's been amazing that I've been able to work on a couple of the different partnerships that we have at Jaguar Land Rover. And here I am now in the Jaguar Racing team. So it's an amazing place to be, but it definitely wasn't the planned path to get here. Kind of opportunities arose and I took them.
Sounds fab, but just explain very quickly what it is you actually do with now.
Oh, so yeah, that's a good question. So my job as media officer relates to a whole host of different things. So it's in basically trying to tell stories and to get them into various different publications globally. It's working with the various different markets that we have. So obviously we're a global company and we're a global race team, and we have lots of markets around the world that are interested in racing. So we make sure that they get the assets and they get the key press releases. Then it's also based on looking after the racing drivers and working out if they can do interviews or webinars, or if they could potentially do something to help gain traction for one of our products. So for example, we've got the F-Pace PHEV, the E-Pace PHEV, the I-Pace. So how can we get drivers involved with our products and help launch those? And then we also basically help them tell the stories of race to road and race to innovate. So how what we have on the racetrack correlates into the road cars. And yeah, I'd say that's a synopsis of what I do.
Very comprehensive as well. Hazel, let's move on to you. Your route to being with us today and what you actually do.
So mine's like almost a supervillain origin story or something, because like a lot of people that now work in motorsport, when I was 6, I wanted to be a Formula One driver, and because Formula E hadn't been invented and wouldn't be for more than 2 decades. But I told my parents this, and they probably not keen on the whole expensive karting career in the first place. Well, like, no, you can't do it, you're a girl. And I was like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And then they actually managed to nix me by pointing out I was a really gobby environmentalist with like far too many opinions already as a 6-year-old to be like a PR-able driver. I'd be a nightmare if Emily had to deal with me. So I moved on to the more achievable ambition. And this was genuinely what I wanted to be when I grew up, which was like a kind of bohemian, penniless writer. So I can actually say I am living my childhood dreams. But I was a journalist for 11 years in different fields. And then when Formula E appeared in 2014, there was a way to reconcile that gobby environmentalism with the sport that I really love. So it was sort of something that kind of very much made me want to work in and to be part of telling stories around motorsport and bringing that to people.
Imogen, what about you?
So how I end up getting here is probably a combination of doing English language at uni, because I knew I wanted to work in communications. So that was kind of a generic, can't even speak though. I want to communication, can't even talk. A generic degree that I could apply to anything. And then whilst at uni, I just applied for different work experience. I liked cars and motorsport, so tried to get into the PR teams within different companies, and I ended up getting work experience that then turned into a job after uni. Worked at that automotive PR agency for a couple of years, moved to another PR agency who worked with Jaguar. So that's how I ended up here.
Just explain a little bit about what you do for the team.
So I work with Emily, essentially, so helping that storytelling, making sure that Jaguar Racing gets to the forefront of people's mind when they think of Formula E.
In a nutshell.
She's done it perfectly, summarised perfectly. All those things I was trying to say.
She did the degree in English language.
I definitely didn't.
So what would you say is the biggest thing that you have learned throughout your career, Ems?
So obviously I've been in the automotive industry for coming up to 5 years, shall we say. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is to be honest. So I think that everything that you can do, if you can't do something, don't try and sugarcoat that you can, don't try and pretend that you can, just be honest, stay true to yourself, ask questions when you need to ask questions. If you don't, at the moment, completely transparently, I'm learning all about the different technical things that there are to learn about the I-Type 5. So I'm learning about brake-by-wire, and I'm learning about anti-roll bar cages, and I'm learning about torsion bars and battery powers. Anyway, all of these things that I don't know, and I just think that if you stay honest, you stay true to yourself, and if you ask questions if you don't know the answer, I think it will take you a long way in life.
Very good. Hazel, what would you say the biggest thing you learned is? Obviously, I mean, is your driving up to being a Formula One driver, or are you better?
Absolutely not. No. The biggest thing I've learned definitely is, and this sounds really like fridge magnety, but like, if you want to work in something that you love, don't do it to be liked. And I don't just mean like in terms of the response you might get from like fans or other people, but if you really love the field that you work in, sometimes it won't love you back. Mm-hmm. And like that, you have to learn to balance that with professionally and sort of not take it too hard, and to treat it as to somehow distance yourself from it.
I guess sometimes the scoop is actually in sort of uncovering the story that people don't actually want to uncover. So you are, as you say, you're not in it to be, to necessarily make friends. You're in it because that's what your job is.
Yeah, very much so.
And Imogen, what about you?
What's the biggest thing I have learned? It's probably majorly just to listen and to learn from different people, even if you might be talking to, I don't know, a mechanic or an engineer or somebody from sponsorship, and that isn't necessarily the field or the part of the team that you work in. Listening and learning what their challenges are or what they're trying to do is important, just to make sure you have that wider context behind your role as well.
So obviously you're all in what is perceived to be a very male-dominated, male-orientated environment. Do you think being a female makes any difference to any of you? To any of your jobs or any of the outcomes of your jobs?
I think that particularly in the role that we're in, there's quite a lot of women working in it anyway. So sales, marketing, PR, communications functions, I would argue, are probably quite well split with men and women. It just happens to be that we are in motorsport, and when we're at the racetrack, you are then surrounded by predominantly male engineers, male mechanics, And then all of a sudden, the ratio of men to women we then become quite a minority.
Hazel, do you find that being a woman just helps get to the bottom of the story? Do you find you get people to open up more or not?
I think it's difficult to balance. Like there's definitely, so I would say like my laptop doesn't know what gender I am, but actually my laptop knows everything about me and the history of anything by this point. But like mechanically, in theory, what I do is ask questions and then explain the answers to other people. And that shouldn't necessarily matter like what gender you are in terms of that. But realistically, all journalists work from the ideas that you have, and those come from who you are as a person and what informs the way that you see the world. And so inevitably, there will be differences in the way that I approach something from compared to a male journalist. Like, for instance, I was speaking to some male journalists at a race a while back, and they had never thought about the fact that when you go to MediaPen, you're interviewing 20 men or 24 men or whatever. And there will never be a woman. And like I hadn't really thought about it until at some point I was interviewing the iPage drivers, and I was like, God, I've spoken to a lot of women today. There's always going to be a sort of strange perception around it, I think, as long as there is this imbalance and women are a minority in the field, which they definitely are in motorsport journalism. I think sometimes it's been a tiny advantage. So like there's a couple of drivers who will speak to me in a way that they won't speak to the others. And I also once got left totally unguarded with the head of a very technical bit of a very technical manufacturer, because they clearly didn't think I was going to ask him any sort of like in-depth questions, and got an absolutely colossal scoop out of it. So, and they couldn't do anything about it because they just left me unattended. And I'd been told I had 10 minutes to ask anything I wanted. So I did.
Off you went. Oh, that's brilliant. So Emma, when you were making those applications to race teams, was anyone surprised that you were a female trying to get in, or?
I don't think so. No, I don't think certainly from my limited experience, it changed their reaction, I don't think. And I think, to be honest, as people have already mentioned that you've been chatted to previously, I think it's more about other attributes that kind of inform whether you're going to have a good outcome at your job or not. So whether that be if you're a good communicator, a good organiser, ability to think fast, whatever that might be, I think those things tend to have a bigger impact than necessarily your gender, I would argue.
So in all of your working lives, have any of you ever experienced any sort of obvious discrimination, or have there ever been events that just make you take a step back and think, I can't believe that in this day and age something like that, or somebody has actually said something like that to me? Has that ever happened to any of you?
There's definitely a lot of stuff, and some of it's like very petty stuff, like just being kind of snubbed as not one of the boys, more usually by my peers than kind of anyone else. And like that's less and less now, but like it definitely has been something I've experienced in the past.
So Emma and Emily, have either of you ever experienced anything, or have you all had positive experiences? I'd like to think that, given that you're both so young, it has only been positive experiences.
Yeah, I'd argue that it's only been positive so far. I think that the thing that worries me the most is this glass ceiling, and that we're maybe not at the point yet where I'm experiencing that glass ceiling, because I'm still young and still, haven't been tried to have children yet, haven't gone off to get married. I'm not trying to become a director overnight. So I would argue that I haven't necessarily faced these barriers, but I don't think that I'm necessarily going to get through my career without facing those barriers. I'm sure that they're going to come. They just haven't come yet, which makes me sad, and I hope that they don't. And, there are some amazing role models at Jaguar Land Rover. There are women in fantastic positions, which is amazing, and it does give you some kind of inspiration that you can get there. But I did also write my dissertation on women in the automotive industry, and the findings from that were not great.
I had a funny experience when I was pregnant with my first child. Of course, being in automotive, I wasn't ready for the glass ceiling, but my God, it came down on me heavy and fast. Suddenly, they decided that even just being pregnant, I was now a health and safety risk in the paddock. So I wasn't allowed to go into the paddock being pregnant because somehow that affected my ability to look at traffic. Yeah, health and safety, I was told. I remember going away and sort of weeping because that then shut the door on about 7 years of my working life because I couldn't have both my kids and sort of be working at the same, I had to stop every time I got pregnant. And so, yeah, anyway.
Yeah,
there we go. I'm glad to see things have changed these days and it's less of a problem. Finally, anyone that actually wants to come into the industry with a similar role to yourself, you guys are working role models, whether you like it or not, whether you feel like it or not. So what would your advice be to people? Emily, we'll start with you.
So I think I said earlier, just stay open and honest to yourself. Be honest with what you do. If you don't know the answers, ask questions. I think that's super important. Number 2, don't really have a plan. I think it's amazing if you know exactly what it is you want to do, but I thought I wanted to be a lawyer and I'm now in the best job I could have ever imagined being in. I just didn't know it yet. So I think it's really important that have a plan, but don't feel like you have to stick to that plan, because if other opportunities arise, actually it could be your dream job role. You just don't know about it yet. And I would say work really hard. I think nothing's ever given to you on a plate. Mm-hmm. And if it is, then well done, lucky for those people. But I think working really hard is really important and hard work will always be recognised.
Brilliant. Hazel?
I would say if you want to be a paddock journalist, if you want to be the people who are actually in, who are doing the interviews with drivers, who are and those are the roles that people want, usually when they set out to be a motorsport journalist, then you have to put yourself there. Like, you will not, nobody is ever going to sort of gently upgrade you into that role if you're not forcing your way in. And that's sometimes quite difficult to get that done and to be that assertive. But the fact is that if you do not, there will always be someone else who takes that job if you don't. And so, yeah, you have to be very proactive in that respect and not be dependent on waiting for permission to be kind of upgraded to that point.
Thanks, Hazel. Imo, finally.
I would say even if it wasn't necessarily motorsport that you wanted to get into, but just something that is kind of what you're focused on, I would just say try not to let any no's get in your way and don't lose belief in yourself, because if you keep trying, you probably will get there or certainly end up on a path that is something that you end up enjoying.
Fab. You're all mega. Well, it has been absolutely great to hear from some of our hardworking individuals behind the Formula E Championship, and we hope you have found it both interesting and informative and as much fun as we've had actually doing the recording. Stay tuned to the next episode of Recharge at Home, which you can, of course, watch on YouTube or download from your normal podcast provider.
One of the most dominant races in the history of the championship, Mitch Evans wins in Mexico City.
Yeah! Yes! This is how it's done, mate. Superb drive.